Hey everyone, this is Zach with 8020 Media, here today with a video on why used BMWs are so cheap. Now, it's important to note right off the bat, not all used BMWs are necessarily cheap, and not all models suffer from significant depreciation rates. The average vehicle tends to lose about 40% of its value in the first 5 years. A lot of that does come in the first year, and especially as soon as you drive the vehicle off the lot. That is where you're going to lose the biggest chunk to depreciation, but ultimately over a 5-year span, the average vehicle tends to lose about 40% of its value. Some BMW models are actually pretty close to that average of 40%. However, some models are much worse and even exceed 60% depreciation in their first 5 years. So obviously a pretty big number there. Throughout the video and towards the end, I'll discuss which BMW models tend to be the cheapest and which ones really lose the most value to depreciation in their first 5 years. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump in and discuss some of the reasons that used BMWs are so cheap. Number one on the list is reliability. Reliability is one of the main reasons that used BMWs tend to be cheaper than your average car. Really, it's no secret, a lot of people know that BMW doesn't have a great reputation for reliability. I'm sure a lot of people have heard the BMW acronyms, big money waster, bring my wrench. So BMW definitely doesn't have the greatest reputation for reliability, and that's one thing that definitely hurts the resale value of used BMWs, and a big reason that used BMWs are so cheap. That's especially true on the basis that there are a number of common BMW problems that tend to pop up around that 5 to 8 year and about 80 to 120,000 mile ballpark, including issues with the cooling system, issues with oil leaks and gaskets, and a number of other issues. Of course, what problems certain BMWs have really boils down to the specific model and specific engine. There are some highly unreliable BMWs and some very reliable BMWs. This doesn't necessarily apply to every BMW that they are unreliable and that's why they are so cheap. However, reliability is certainly a big factor. Now, with that being said, one important thing to point out is BMW has actually ranked very well for reliability, especially over the last few years. And in general, BMW has greatly improved their reliability in the last roughly 5 to 7 years. So time will tell if that starts to help BMW depreciation and help hold up BMW values moving forward. BMW is definitely trending in the right direction, but nonetheless, BMW's history with reliability is certainly one of the biggest reasons why used BMWs are so cheap. Moving on to reason number 2 for why used BMWs are so cheap, we have maintenance and repairs. So this ties a little bit into reliability. However, going further than just reliability, even if your average BMW doesn't have any actual engine problems or failures or any electrical issues, BMWs are still going to be more expensive than your average vehicle to work on, repair, and maintain. When things do go wrong, a lot of BMW engines can be pretty challenging to work on. Repair shops tend to charge pretty expensive hourly rates to work on these cars, and the book hours on some jobs for labor can also be pretty aggressive. For example, a lot of BMWs may have simple oil leaks from a $30 valve cover gasket, tend to be about 5 to 10 hours for the repair, which can quickly add up to a $500 to $1,000+ repair bill for a simple $30 gasket. And so if you are taking a BMW to a repair shop, things can get expensive very quickly, and BMW does have a reputation for the cars and engines being a bit more challenging to work on, being a bit more expensive to work on, and the parts being more expensive. So that's one big reason that used BMWs are so cheap, is just the additional cost of maintenance, and tying into that too the requirement for running premium fuel. That adds up over time. And then circling back to basic maintenance, just as with repair bills, is going to be a little bit more expensive. Depending on the specific BMW model, it might even be a little bit more demanding. That's going to be especially true when you start looking at some of the bigger BMW models, especially performance-oriented ones. For example, a 2020 BMW M5, if you needed to do a full brake job on the vehicle, replace all 4 brake pads and all 4 brake rotors, just the OEM parts are about $1,500 to $2,000, and that's not even genuine BMW or pricing that you would pay at the dealership. That's if you were to just go buy the original equipment manufacturer parts online, and that's not factoring in any labor costs there. So if you are going to a shop for that, again, you'll likely end up shelling out a decent chunk of change for the repair and brake job. So if you look at a car like the BMW M5, you're talking about spending $3,000 to replace the brakes, which is just basic maintenance and obviously an incredibly steep price to pay for maintenance like a brake job. So ultimately, that high cost of ownership, repairs if problems do pop up, and even just the more expensive maintenance costs in general and upkeep with things like premium fuel, those are all definitely big reasons as to why used BMWs can be so cheap. Moving on to the third and final point as to why used BMWs are so cheap, ultimately BMW is a luxury brand. Luxury cars in general tend to fare a lot worse with holding their value. They depreciate at a much faster rate than the average vehicle, with a lot of luxury vehicles losing 50 to 60% of their value after the first 5 years. A few reasons luxury cars tend to lose their value a little bit quicker. Luxury cars in general are going to be more expensive. They're a little more complicated to maintain, a little more expensive to maintain and repair when things do go wrong. And so the fact that luxury cars are expensive to own is one reason they tend to lose their values a lot faster, and you can pick them up for very cheap prices used. On top of that, technology in luxury cars tends to become outdated quickly, and so that can certainly reduce the value of these luxury cars. And then lastly, especially looking at bigger, higher end luxury cars like the BMW 5 Series or the BMW 7 Series models along that line, these are very expensive vehicles, and oftentimes they are seen as kind of a status symbol. And so if someone can really afford a car that is that valuable and that expensive, they're probably not looking to buy a used BMW 7 Series. At that point, they would much rather just buy the brand new vehicle. So some of these highly valuable luxury cars lose their values a little bit quicker until they come down to price points that larger masses can actually afford the vehicles and afford to buy them used. Ultimately, those are really the three main reasons used BMWs are so cheap. They can be unreliable, repair costs are expensive, basic maintenance is expensive, and ultimately BMW is seen as a luxury brand. So with all that being said, when you look at BMWs and talk about which ones are going to be the cheapest and lose their most value over the first 5 years, it's going to be these bigger, more expensive luxury models. So the 5 Series, the 7 Series, the X5, the X7, even the 6 and 8 Series. These vehicles are going to depreciate at a much faster rate. Specifically the X5, 5 Series, and 7 Series are the models that you are going to start seeing about 60% depreciation in the first 5 years. However, the smaller, cheaper models, lower MSRPs, and the sportier models, looking at things like the 1 Series, 2 Series, 3 Series, and 4 Series, all of those vehicles tend to be much better and a lot closer to the average of about 40% depreciation after the first 5 years. So ultimately, those smaller cars that are a little bit less luxury based and a little less luxury oriented are going to hold their values a little bit better and aren't going to be quite as good of a value buy on the used market. Anyway, guys, that wraps up our video for today. If you appreciated the content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out the description below for more. Thanks, everyone.